this sutta that we are now reading is a little different from the others, although it does have the teaching in it, but it also has history in it. It's a historical account of what happened to the Buddha before he was the Buddha, when he became the Buddha, and right after he had become the Buddha. Now there are other accounts, longer ones. This is a short account, but it tells the main aspects of it. So it has that interest for us, maybe that we learn a little bit about his life at its most crucial point. This was the most crucial point, obviously, because from that moment on the teaching existed. So now this Brahma Sahampati thought, I've made it possible for the Dhamma to be taught by the Blessed One, and after paying homage to me, keeping me on his right side, the Brahma departed. And then the Buddha says, now I considered thus, to whom should I first teach the Dhamma? Who will soon understand this Dhamma? And I considered thus, Alara Kalama is wise, learned and discerning. He has long had little dust in his eyes. Suppose I taught the Dhamma first to Alara Kalama, he will soon understand it. It's not only that he wanted to teach it to Alara Kalama because he would understand it soon, but also because it is a tradition in the East everywhere that one's greatest responsibility and duty is to one's spiritual teacher. The gratitude to the spiritual teacher overshadows even the gratitude to one's own parents. And so there is a responsibility, and so he thinks of his teacher first, Alara Kalama, the first teacher he had. And then gods approached me and said, Venerable Sir, Alara Kalama died 7 days ago. Now what about these gods approaching him? It sounds a bit off, doesn't it, in our way of thinking? Well, but we do say, I just knew it, or I had an intuition, or it came into my mind that I knew something was happening in my home. I should ring up, or I had a feeling something was wrong with my friend, or even stronger than that. Well, this is stronger than that. There's a definite input into his mind that the Alara Kalama died. And he says, and I considered thus, and the knowledge and vision arose in me, Alara Kalama died 7 days ago. So he understood, he died. He didn't have to, and he didn't question that knowing. Now we are very apt to question it, and rightly so. When we have a knowing, we're apt to question it, because we know ourselves to be still impure. The Buddha was totally pure. There was no way he could question his knowing. He was certain. If he knew that Alara Kalama was dead, well, that was it. He knew it. Now sometimes we might be well off not to question our own knowing. We might be well off to rely on it. But very often that knowing seems to be so different from what our logic is telling us that we don't dare believe it. I have often found in my life it's much better to believe it, even though it sounds completely different from any logical conclusion. So he knew Alara Kalama was dead. I considered thus, Alara Kalama's loss is a great one. If he had heard this Dhamma, he would soon have understood it. And so he's very sorry that he died, not because he's now not able to see him, but because he thinks that Alara Kalama would have become enlightened if he had been able to teach him. Now I considered thus, to whom should I first teach the Dhamma? Who will understand this Dhamma? I considered thus, Udakaramaputra is wise, learned and discerning. He has long had little dust in his eyes. Suppose I taught the Dhamma first to Udakaramaputra. He will soon understand it. And then the gods approached me and said, Venerable Sir, Udakaramaputra died last night. And the knowledge and vision in me said, Udakaramaputra died last night. And I considered thus, Udakaramaputta's loss is a great one. If he had heard this Dhamma, he would soon have understood it. So it is a well-known fact, and often told, that the first people he thought of were his own spiritual teachers, his own meditation teachers. But they were both dead by the time that he became enlightened. There was nothing he could do for them. It was also said the greatest gift is giving the Dhamma, so this is what he wanted to give them. He wanted to give them this step to enlightenment. And then he considered thus, to whom should I first teach the Dhamma? Who will understand this Dhamma? And I considered thus, the bhikkhus of the group of 5 who attended me while I was engaged in the struggle for control were very helpful. Suppose I taught the Dhamma first to them. These bhikkhus of the group of 5, he calls them bhikkhus. They are usually called the 5 ascetics, and they were his companions with the teacher. It's not that he met them later. He met them when he were with these teachers, and they went from the first teacher with him to the second teacher. But when he left the second teacher, then they did not come with him. They practiced ascetic practices together with him, and these ascetic practices were very extreme, and so he says they were helpful to him. They are usually called the 5 ascetics, because this was their main claim to fame, that they were doing these practices. I considered thus, where are the bhikkhus of the group of 5 living now? And with heavenly eyesight, clairvoyance, which is purified and surpasses the human, I saw that they were living at Benares in the deer park at Isipatana. The deer park at Isipatana is at Sonat, which is just outside of Benares, and it has been resurrected. There are deer there again, and the Mahabodhi Society is looking after it. It's very beautiful. There's a small museum there also, which has the earliest and oldest Buddha statues in it in the world, and the ruins are there of the kutis that were built there when the Buddha was living there. It's not called Isipatana anymore, but it's supposed to be the exact site where this happened, the deer park at Isipatana, where the first discourse was being held. It's not mentioned the name of the first discourse, but we'll come to that. And when I had stayed at Uruvela as long as I chose, I set out to go by stages to Benares. Now he was walking, and to go by foot from Bodh Gaya to Benares. Well, it's quite a distance. It's even pretty bad by bus, never mind on foot. Between Gaya and the place of enlightenment, the monk Upaka saw me on the road. This is quite nice. Seeing me, he said, "Friend, the color of your skin is pure and bright." In other words, you look very bright, you know. "Under whom have you gone forth, friend? Who is your teacher? Whose Dhamma do you confess?" So Dhamma is not just the Buddha's teaching. Dhamma is the truth. It is a word used for spiritual truth and that sort of thing. So he's asking him, you know, "You're looking very well, looking very nice. Who is your teacher? What do you know?" And when this was said, I replied to the monk Upaka in stanzas. "Transcender of all being, all knower am I, unsullied in all Dhammas, renouncing them all, by craving ceasing freed. And this do I owe to my own wit. To whom should I concede it? I have no teacher, and my like exists nowhere in all the world, with all its gods, because I have no person for my counterpart. I am the teacher in the world, without a peer, an Arahant too, and I alone am full enlightened, quenched whose fires are quite extinct. I go to Kasi's city now, to set in motion the Dhamma's wheel. In a world that's blind become, I go to beat the deathless drum." Well, he got the appropriate response. This monk didn't believe a word he said, because if somebody comes to us today and says, "All knower am I am without a peer, I am Arahant, fully enlightened, and I have no person for my counterpart," well, it's a bit hard to take, isn't it? Well, Upaka thought the same thing. "Now, by your claims, friend, you ought to be a victor universal. The victors like me, Upaka, are these won to exhaustion of taints. I vanquished all evil Dhammas, for that I am a victor. When this was said, the monk Upaka said, may it be so, friend. Shaking his head, he took a bypass and departed. Didn't believe a word of this. This that he had no teacher is also interesting. We have in our tradition only 5 hand movements, mudras, and this one that the statue has there is of course a meditation one, and the one below also. But then there's one downstairs, the big statue has it, and it's a hand, it's supposed to be touching the earth. And this is calling the earth to witness to his enlightenment, because there was nobody that he could confirm it with. So he's calling the earth to witness for his enlightenment. This is a hand movement. It's a tradition that says that. There's another hand movement which the standing statue has, which is this, which is no fear. And then there's this one, which is teaching, the wheel of the Dhamma. And this is what he says here: to set in motion the Dhamma's wheel. Now the first discourse which he gave then, very shortly in this sutta, it's called Dhamma Chakra Pavadana Sutta. Dhamma Chakra is the wheel of the Dhamma. Dhamma Chakra, Chakra is the wheel. Pavadana, to set in motion. To set in motion the wheel of the Dhamma Sutta. So that's his first discourse, which he gave to the 5 ascetics. Why they're translated here as bhikkhus, I don't know. It's not proper, because the word bhikkhu arose then when the Buddha made them into monks. It's more proper to call them 5 ascetics. Benares was also called Kasi. I think it has something to do with the silk that was being transported there, but I'm not sure. But he's saying, I'm going to Benares, and there's no teacher. I've done it by my own wit, he says. And now, to be a universal victor, he says, yes, I am. I'm a universal conqueror. Victor, conqueror. I've often said universal conqueror. He says, yes, I am a conqueror. I've conquered all the taints. So that's my conquering. I've vanquished all evil Dhammas. So now Upaka says, well, may it be so, friend, and goes away. And then, wandering by stages, I came at length to the Benares, to the deer park at Isipatana, where the ascetics, the 5 ascetics, were. They saw me coming at a distance, and they agreed among themselves thus: friends, here comes a monk Gautama, who turned self-indulgent, shirked control, and reverted to luxury. Now you see, asceticism was and is highly prized in India, and it is supposed to be the way to enlightenment. Now, the Buddha, before his enlightenment, decided that that wasn't the way. He wasn't getting anywhere with it. It wasn't doing any good to him. He was just having a terrible bodily pains. And also, his body was becoming so weak that he was unable to pursue the meditation well, because he had been fasting for a long, long time on 1 rice corn a day, it says. Who knows? And his body was becoming weaker and weaker. So he decided this wasn't it. And so he started eating properly again. And as he became enlightened, meditated and became enlightened, his skin was very luminous. And he looked very nice and in his robes and washed and dressed. And so they said, oh, well, look who's coming there. He's self-indulgent. He's shirking control. He's reverting to luxury. Look at him. He looks nice. We ought not to pay homage to him, or rise up for him, or receive his bowl and robe. But a seat can be prepared for him. If he likes, he can sit down. So they weren't going to have any reverence for him, because obviously he was no longer ascetic. I mean, ascetic is supposed to be so thin you can see each bone, and you're not supposed to have a nice-looking skin or nice robes on. So they weren't going to pay any reverence to him. However, as soon as I approached, they found themselves unable to keep their pact. One came to meet me and took my bowl and outer robe, and another prepared a seat, and another got water ready for my feet, and they addressed me by name as friend. when this was said, I told them, ascetics, do not address a Tathagata by name as friend. A Tathagata is an Arahant and fully enlightened. Now a Tathagata, the word Tathagata, it just can't be translated into English. That's why it's always kept in Pali or Sanskrit. Gata is gone. Tata is such gone. A one gone such. Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like much in English, does it? So you can't really say a person gone such, but that's what it means. It is suchness, as it is. There is nothing other than suchness. There's nothing for a person who is fully enlightened, there's nothing to judge or to like or dislike, or even to change or to have or to get rid of. Everything is suchness. And so he himself becomes that suchness, because he himself is no longer himself. He himself is then part of all that is. And all that is him. In Sanskrit, in Hindi I should say, but it is a derivative of Sanskrit in this case, it's very often said, Tatvam Asi, such I am, such it is. It's the same thing. It's again the same syllable of tat, Tathagata, tat. So the word Tathagata is never translated. We just, can't do it. We can say a suchness one, well, that doesn't. But what he says is a Tathagata can't be addressed as friend. In other words, pay a bit of respect, be a bit respectful. A Tathagata is an Arahant, fully enlightened. Listen, bhikkhus, the deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you, I shall teach you the Dhamma. By practicing as you are instructed, you will, by realization yourselves here and now, through direct knowledge, enter upon and abide in that supreme goal of the holy life, on account of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. Now when this was said, the ascetics answered, thus, friend Gautama, and they're not calling him Tathagata, Arahant, Bhagavan, nothing, they're calling him friend Gautama. They are not convinced at all. They're calling him just the same as they always have. With the behavior that way and the difficult feats which you practice, the ascetic feats, you achieve no distinction worthy of a noble one's knowledge and vision higher than the human state. So what they're saying is, look, when you were an ascetic, you didn't get anywhere. Since you have now turned self-indulgent, shirked control, and reverted to luxury, how will you have achieved any such distinction? When this was said, I told them, a Tathagata is not one who has turned self-indulgent, nor has he shirked control and reverted to luxury. A Tathagata is an Arahant and fully enlightened. Listen, bhikkhus, the deathless has been attained, and he repeats the whole thing again. But the bhikkhus are not convinced, and they're saying the same thing a second time, and he answers them a second time, and then they said the same thing a third time. Now, when this was said a third time, I asked them, bhikkhus, have you ever known me to speak like this before? Because they've known him for years. They were together with, striving. No, venerable sir. Bhikkhus, a Tathagata is an Arahant and fully enlightened. Listen, bhikkhus, the deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you. I shall teach you the Dhamma. By practicing as you are instructed, you will, by realization yourself here and now, through direct knowledge, enter upon and abide in that supreme goal of the life divine, on account of which clansmen rightly go forth from home life into homelessness. So he says this a fourth time. And these are very traditional sentences. They are repeated all through the suttas, everywhere, where the Buddha instructs all the way to Nibbana. The last sentence is exactly the same everywhere. The supreme goal of the holy life, on account of which clansmen, people of good standing, rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. So this is the fourth time he's saying it. Now, I was able to convince the 5 ascetics. And now there's a large chunk missing here, not necessarily because that is missing in the sutta, but a large chunk of what he actually did say. what is said here is that sometimes I instructed 2 bhikkhus while 3 went for alms, and we 6 lived upon what the 3 brought back from their alms round. Sometimes I instructed 3 bhikkhus while 2 went for alms, and we 6 lived upon what the 2 brought back from their alms round. And what he actually did was, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is the sutta on the 4 Noble Truths with the Noble Eightfold Path. And it took him a week. And it's extremely repetitive. He repeats it again and again, most likely because he wanted the 5 ascetics to repeat it after him. So there was no way, no tape recorder, no books, no nothing. They just had to be remembered. So this is the turning the wheel of the Dhamma are the 4 Noble Truths with the Noble Eightfold Path. And the story does go that they were sitting under the tree in the Deer Park at Isipatana, and he kept on teaching while they 2 went for alms round, or sometimes 3 went, and then they brought it back, ate it, and kept on teaching. This went on for a whole week. And now in this particular sutta, it's very interesting. I had never come across it before. What it usually says is that at the end of the teaching, the Buddha said, Ayya Khema sees, Ayya Khema knows. Now, Ayya Khema was one of the 5. And when you see and know, it means that you have the understood experience. You know and you see. But first you see and then you know. But here it says that all 5 of them did. So, then the bhikkhus of the group of 5, thus taught and instructed by me, being themselves subject to birth, age, disease and death, sorrow and defilement, knowing the danger in these phenomena, seeking the unborn, unaging, non-diseased, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled, supreme surcease of bondage, which is Nibbana, attained to the unborn, unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled, supreme surcease of bondage, which is Nibbana. So all 5 did. The knowledge and vision arose in them. My deliverance is unassailable. This is my last birth. There is now no renewal of being. Now, I may have said this before, but I'll say it again. And people are often dubious about rebirth. They have no personal knowledge of it. They have nothing to prove it, that is so. And the idea seems somewhat imaginary. But I have often said that if you would compare that to this day, and go to sleep at night and wake up in the morning, you have a wonderful personal experience of rebirth. Now you bring with you to the next morning all the karma you've made. You can't wake up without it. It's impossible. If you've been nasty to somebody the day before, well, you might still feel a bit nasty inside, and surely that other person doesn't feel very good towards you, just to put it on a very, very easy level. During the night, we don't know what happens. It's a small death. And in the morning, as we wake up, we start all over again. But yet, we cannot possibly be the same person that we were the day before. It just isn't possible. We cannot have the same thoughts. We cannot have the same feelings. We cannot even have the same body, even though it looks the same. But it's definitely a day older and one day nearer to the grave. That's guaranteed. So while we have woken up with the karma intact and having memory of the day before, we have no doubt that yesterday it was me and today it's also me, usually with a capital M. What happened? Nothing happened except that our karma was carried forward to the next day. That's exactly what rebirth does, with the exception of memory. Because of the trauma of the human birth, which happens to the baby, all memory is obliviated. There's no memory of past life usually. Although small children often do remember, in our culture that's not believed and accepted. So we tell the children to stop talking nonsense and to get on with their toys or whatever they're doing. So small children do remember, but as we get older we don't remember a thing. So because we have no memory of what happened before that death, we think it wasn't there. Well, why shouldn't it have been there? Why should it not have been there? And why shouldn't we bring our karma with us and have a totally different body and have that karma sitting within the mind and then getting on with it, life after life after life after life after life? So if we look at it from day to day, it certainly is a little easier to swallow. This keeps going until we stop thinking that this is me. No, I'll change that statement. Until we stop feeling that this is me. We might stop thinking this is me, but that doesn't do us any good. We've got to stop feeling this is me. And when we stop feeling this is me, which means our fully enlightened, then there is no way that the karma can be carried forward, because what possible carrier can there be? The person who has no me doesn't make any karma anymore. The person who has no me acts, speaks, thinks, eats, sleeps, everything. Looks just like anybody else. Maybe a little nicer, who knows. But because there's no feeling of me, there's nobody there to make karma. Because there's nobody there to make karma, when the body breaks up, the mind reverts to the unborn emptiness. And we won't discuss that one. We'll just go there, huh? So this is what he's saying here. He's saying that the knowledge and vision arose in the five ascetics. Their deliverance is unassailable. This is my last birth. There is now no renewal of being. Because the feeling of me is disappeared, then the karma making disappears, and then there cannot be return to mind and body, which has arisen out of craving to be. Mind and body have, personal mind, personal body have arisen out of craving to be. Is that quite clear? Any questions?
I was just wondering if the birth trauma eliminating the memory, would the child in the womb, sort of be conscious of how?
I don't know. It's possible. It's certainly possible, but I don't know. I can't say with certainty. Possibility exists. There are so many possibilities in this universe that we have not tasted or savored, that we can, think it's all right like that or not. I don't know. I really don't know. Quite clear about karma and rebirth? Yes, all right. Now comes the teachings that he's giving them. He's teaching them, and he's repeating what he's teaching them. And the interesting part of that is, in this particular sutta, that he's not mentioning the Four Noble Truths or the Noble Eightfold Path, because that is the first discourse. This, what he's teaching them, is of course an enlargement upon the first Noble Truths, first and second Noble Truths. This is an elaboration on it. Now, bhikkhus, there are these 5 courts of sensual desire. What are the 5? Forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. Sounds cognizable by the ear, odors cognizable by the nose, flavors cognizable by the tongue, tangibles cognizable by the body, provocative of lust. These are the 5 courts of sensual desire. Now, we know that the first noble truth is that there is dukkha, and the second that there's only one cause for dukkha, and that is craving. There's no other. So, what he's talking about here is that these 5 courts of sensual desire are giving us and are the causes for our desire and lust. Because when we see the form or the sound or the odor or the flavor, that's when we want it. Now it's easy to recognize with food, no problem. Most people can recognize that very easily with food. They taste something that tastes nice, they want another bit of it. I mean, everybody does that. And sometimes one has to really stop oneself on purpose not to go with that desire. And the same is with the sex urge. It's in the first instance a form cognizable by the eye. Looks good, looks nice. It's a proper shape, the right size and all the rest of it. So then lust arises for that. Whatever the form may be, it can be anything. There's no counting for taste. But that is what we know about ourselves without any question. And as we see that and watch that in ourselves, it doesn't mean that we blame it. It's never the right response. There's nothing to blame. We're human beings, and this is how it works. When you watched the birds out there fighting for their sunflower seeds, I mean, there's plenty to go around. There's plenty for all of them. And yet they bicker and fight. Well, I mean, we're not blaming them, are we? We're just watching them interestedly, what they're doing, and actually how foolish they are. Well, it's the same with us. There's nothing to blame. We're just being foolish, that's all. And the foolishness is, well, it's maybe the word justifiable is a bit strong, but explainable, particularly because of the fact that everybody is equally foolish. It's very difficult to be different. So the lust and desire arising from our senses is not something to either blame or suppress. Neither one of those things work. Never have worked and never will work. And some people do try, and this is exactly what the Buddha taught, not to suppress. Asceticism doesn't work, he said. Indulgence doesn't either. That's why his teaching is called the middle path. But what we do, what we can do, and where the way is open for us, is to recognize the fact that every gratification of essential desire makes nothing happen except another sensual desire which has to be gratified. That's all that happens. It's never ending. There is no end to them. Obviously, if we can get them gratified, we feel that we're doing quite well, and we have pleasure. And the Buddha said that this kind of pleasure, the sensual pleasure, is gross and not worth pursuing. What we should pursue, the pleasure of the jhanas, of the meditative absorptions, which is also pleasure, which is also worldly. It's still not super mundane, but it is a pleasure which he said he will allow himself. So he's explaining again, as in so many other suttas, the senses. Why is he explaining them so many times? Because an ordinary person without any noble attainment has no other outlet for their wishes and desires except their senses. And with no other outlet, they also have no other gratification except through the senses. And a person who hasn't done any meditation or got any insight at all will be looking for the gratification of the senses and judge the world accordingly, because that's all we know, except when we've got inside there and recognize what's going on inside, that we have actually a jewel of purity which can offer us a totally different level of consciousness, which is no longer connected with the senses but is secluded from them, as all these jhana explanations start out, secluded. But an ordinary person who hasn't done any of this is dependent upon the senses, and not only dependent, but the world has no other dimension. That's all the dimension it has. Now obviously that's extremely limited dimension, isn't it? Just what we can see and hear, taste, touch, smell, and in this case it's all to just the five. Our senses are also rather faulty. We can see as far as the horizon. We can't look around the corner. We can't see ultraviolet light. Bees can. Our ears are also not extremely well made. We do not hear very high-pitched sound that dogs do hear. And yet dogs and bees are not as highly developed beings as we are. So our reliance on our senses could obviously not be the complete and absolute truth. It has to be limited. It can't be any other way. Surely the horizon that we can see isn't all there is to this world. And something may be around the corner that might be worth seeing, and we can't see it. And most of us even have to put on glasses to see anything. So that is what we rely on when we don't have anything else that we know about. So that is why this is mentioned so many times by the Buddha, the senses, because our whole world is enmeshed in them. Everything is enmeshed in these sense contacts. So if we ever take time out to check ourselves, and this is very useful to do here while we're still here, because here we have this opportunity. Watch how reliant we are upon our sense contacts. What we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch, and what we smell. Maybe one of the senses not so important, seeing and hearing usually the most important ones. And how we also react to them. And this is a very viable way of understanding what the Buddha is trying to tell us, that this is not the world, this is sense contact, and yet we think it's the world. So he goes on about the senses so many times because we are so enmeshed in them. Now, when any monk or Brahmin is entangled with and unworthily committed to these 5 courts of sensual desire and cultivates them with no vision of the danger in them and no understanding of the escape from them, it may be understood of them thus: they are bound for disaster, bound for ruin, to be done with as he likes by the evil one. Well, the evil one is Mara. He gets translated any which way. And now he's saying that if one is entangled with them and committed to them and cultivates them and has no idea that there's danger in them and has no idea that there's an escape from them, then one is bound for disaster, for ruin, and Mara can do with one what he likes. Why can Mara do something with one as he likes? Because Mara is the one that is telling us that those sensual contacts and desires are worthwhile pursuing. Mara is the tempter, the temptation. And it is the one thing within us. I mean, it's not somebody sitting out there, we know that. It is the one thing within us which is constantly reaffirming that it's okay, it's pleasurable, it's nice, it's fine. What's wrong? I'm not hurting anybody. And this is because why, and I've told you this before, greed is so much more difficult to see than hate. Hate is so unpleasant. Everybody wants to get rid of it. And greed can be so pleasant. It tastes good, it looks good, it sounds good. So what's wrong? Of course, people who have hate are almost more difficult to live with, and that's why they also want to get rid of it. And greed people are usually quite easy to live with, because they enjoy their greed and they want others to enjoy it too. And this is very important, that we finally get a hang of this, that we get a grip on it and see it. It's not that we're going to be able to overcome it immediately, that we can see it in ourselves, that this is what is our, well, if it's our life's aim, it certainly isn't really a very desirable aim. But if it's just as the Buddha says, if one is unknowingly committed without watching the danger, we're really sunk in them, and the tempter can do with us what he likes. We'll get tempted by anything that we think is going to produce pleasure. The temptations, just like the papancha in nature, the papancha of temptations is so multitudinous, it is impossible to come to the end of it. There's always another one. And there's always a nicer one somewhere to be had. So he says that one should watch out for this evil one, Suppose a forest deer were tied to and lay down on a mass of snares, it might be understood of him thus: he's bound for disaster, bound for ruin, to be done with as he likes by the hunter. So too, when any monks or Brahmins are entangled with and unwarily committed to these 5 courts of sensual desire, and cultivate them with no vision of the danger in them and no understanding of the escape from them, it may be understood of them thus: they are bound for disaster, bound for ruin, to be done with as he likes by the evil one. He gives this simile of this deer that is snared by a hunter. Now, when any monk or divine is not entangled, nor unwarily committed to these 5 courts of sensual desire, and does not cultivate them, having the vision of danger in them and understanding the escape, it may be understood of them thus: they are not bound for disaster, nor for ruin, not to be done with as he likes by Mara. And he gives a simile: suppose a forest deer were not tied to, but lay down in a mass of snares, it might be understood of him thus: he's not bound for disaster, not bound for ruin, not to be done with as he likes by the hunter. So if the snares are there, which they are, the world's full of them, and we're not tied to them, but we recognize what we're doing and are able to say no, then we are not in danger. But we have to recognize the danger in these senses, in the greed for the sensual desire. The danger is, first of all, that there's no end to it, and also that it prevents us from seeing an absolute truth which can free us to the extent we no longer carry a burden with us. No matter what the burden may be, the freeing is complete at the end. The danger of these snares of the sensual gratifications is that it takes our time, our energy, and it engulfs us. And the limitation of the world view is such that we cannot really see beyond the horizon in a symbolic way. And this horizon that we actually are able to see is so close to ourselves that it cannot possibly contain universal truth in it. It's too near, too limited. Now that does not mean that once we have seen the danger, that we no longer enjoy our food. People are always afraid of it. And it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy a sunset. And it doesn't mean that we can't hear a bird sing. It means that we no longer spend time and energy to find those things. Or any of it, whatever it may be. I'm only using a few as examples. Some which are not quite as gross as just eating. We don't search for them. We're grateful if something pleasant happens, but we know that there's something much greater available to us within the purity of our own heart and mind, which goes far beyond any sensual gratification. So our energy and our time is freed for depth of practice. And the enjoyment of the beautiful sunset can easily be tinged by the understanding that Mara is trying his level best to get one back where one was before. He doesn't like to lose anybody. It's very, very protective of his subjects, which we are. Now he's giving another simile, the Buddha. Suppose a forest deer is wandering in the forest wilds. He walks without fear and stands without fear. He sits without fear, lies down without fear. Why is that? Because he is out of the hunter's sight. So too, quite secluded from sensual desires, secluded from unprofitable mind states, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by initial and sustained application with happiness and bliss born of seclusion. And this bhikkhu is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one by depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. Now why is that? Why has one blindfolded Mara when one goes into the first jhana? Anybody get any idea why one has blindfolded Mara? Yes?
Because one is no longer looking outwardly for satisfaction.
At that time. Yeah, that's right. Because we can't have any outward desires when we're concentrated on the first jhana. So at that time, Mara does not exist for us. And of course, the first aspect of the sentence was secluded from sensual desire. And that has to be part of the entry into first jhana. So we have actually, if we have been watching ourselves when we're doing this, had a personal experience of the fact that we're getting something much better in blindfolding Mara at this time than what we could ever get when we allow Mara to use our senses to tempt us with the proliferation in the world. The jhana is a much more joyful state than what is usually available through the senses. And if that doesn't convince us, well, the higher jhanas should certainly convince us. And this is actually their most valuable, particularly of the lower jhanas, the most valuable contribution to our spiritual emancipation. That in the first, second and third jhana, where we have a very alert observer, we're experiencing states of mind due to purity, which, or at least temporary purity, which are far more satisfying than any sense contact we could possibly have. And they are also not dependent upon outer conditions. And if that hasn't come clear to us, then we need to have another very concentrated look when we come out, what we have gained as we were in there, not while it's happening, but afterwards. We are not dependent upon any outer condition. We don't have to wait for somebody to cook a nice meal, for the sunset to become beautiful, for the music to sound good. We don't have to wait for anything. We've got it within. We are only dependent upon an inner condition, which is concentration. And that's dependent upon our ability to let go of sensual desire, of which thinking is another one. And as we are alert to the fact that here we are independent, becoming independent, we must also at the same time have that experience that no sense contact can provide this kind of natural inner peacefulness, level of inner being which we can attain in the jhanas. Now these are insights which need to arise after the jhanas, and the first, second, third are perfect for that. Either one of them or all three. These kind of considerations are not to take place while one is in the jhana, because that finishes the jhana, but to take place when one is coming out of them. And the other thing that is to take place when one comes out of them, just to remind you, is that they are impermanent. That they are states which are far preferable to sensual contact, but still impermanent. So what we are looking at again is, interestingly enough, that the Buddha comes from the explanation of the sensual desires to the jhanas. I just want to repeat this once more in case you do read another sutta somewhere else. It's either missing here, or this particular sutta does not take account of it, but it should contain first the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path before the Buddha says that they became enlightened. They became enlightened through that understanding, and because they had done all these jhanas before with the Buddha when they were with the two teachers. And then he goes on to explain about the sensual desires and now about the jhanas. And he's comparing it to the forest deer who's wandering around out of the hunter's sight. So we are out of the sight of Mara when we're in the jhana. Again, with the stilling of initial and sustained application, with happiness and bliss born of seclusion. Sorry, it's not printed. I'm trying to find what it is. Again, with no initial and sustained application, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which is accompanied by initial and sustained application with happiness and bliss born. I'm going to start again. Again, with the stilling of initial and sustained application. I don't know why they don't print the things. Second jhana. This is the first jhana. A bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the second jhana, with happiness and bliss born of seclusion. And this bhikkhu is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one by depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. See, what we do is we're not giving any temptation an opportunity when we are concentrating. Now, obviously, nobody sits in meditation all day long, so we do provide the temptations again to enter us, but provide that opportunity again for the temptations. However, the residue of knowing that we are able to have this satisfaction and fulfillment within should suffice in not making us prone to too much desire, because we know that this kind of concentration can give us far greater satisfaction. There's a residue of them. Nothing that we've ever done with the mind doesn't leave a residue, whether it's good or evil. It's all there, and it makes what we call this person. All the residue of all our thoughts and all our reactions is this person. And as we change our thoughts and change our reactions, we change this person. Particularly its inner field of being, which of course has application to the outer being also. So then, again with the fading away of happiness, bhikkhu enters into the third jhana. He has a pleasant abiding, who has equanimity and is mindful. The third jhana is usually called the pleasant abiding because the happiness and the bliss is let go of at that time. And this bhikkhu is said to have blindfolded Mara, depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. I don't think I need to go into the explanations of the jhanas again, because we have gone through that quite in detail. Or does anybody have any question about 1, 2, 3? We have discussed them, but if there's any question, I'm only too happy to repeat it. Anything? Quite clear, huh? Again, with the abandoning of bodily pleasure and pain, the bhikkhu abides in the fourth jhana, which has purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. And this bhikkhu is said to have blindfolded Mara, depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. This is a little different explanation here of the fourth jhana. Purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. Because this is a very, very strong, peaceful state, it is usually called equanimity. And because equanimity is something that doesn't move, joy has movement in it. Contentment has less movement in it. Equanimity has none, other than all mind states have movement in them, because it is falling apart and coming together. But it's an equilibrium, equanimity. And therefore mindfulness can become purer. Mindfulness being that one-pointed attention. So the fourth jhana has purity of mindfulness due to equanimity, and because of that purity of mindfulness, the observer cannot be noticed. See, when the mindfulness becomes utterly pure, it doesn't have two states, it only has mindfulness. Now, obviously, the observer hasn't vanished, but we can't notice in the fourth. We only know afterwards that this is what happened. So the purity of mindfulness is co-joined with the equanimity, and bodily pleasure and pain are completely gone. Again, with a complete surmounting of perceptions of form, with the disappearance of the perceptions of resistance, with not giving attention to perceptions of difference, aware that space is infinite, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the base consisting of the infinity of space, and this bhikkhu is said to have blindfolded Mara, depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. Now, surmounting perceptions of form, the fine material jhanas are the first four, and they have fine material, fine form in them. There is form in so far that we still have equanimity as our base of, or mindfulness as our base of focus. Whereas when we go into the formless jhanas, which are the next four, there is absolutely no form anymore. It is nothing that we can put our finger on. We can put our finger on equanimity. It's balance, it's equilibrium. But we can't put our finger on infinity of space. Impossible. It's just infinity of space. But the interesting aspect is also the disappearance of the perception of resistance, which is undoubtedly the disappearance of the perception of limitation. Then in this case, the resistance is that there is a limit and then there's another limit and another limit. We resist the fact of oneness. It's all there are limitations, there are separations. With not giving attention to perceptions of difference. There's no difference. In the infinity of space, nothing. There's no difference anymore. In a oneness, in a totality, there's no difference and there's no resistance, which means that nothing, one thing, can resist another. So the word limitation would also apply here. Again, by completely surmounting the base consisting of the infinity of space, is aware that consciousness is infinite, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the base consisting of the infinity of consciousness. Well, there's no other explanation here for consciousness base. We have discussed it. Surmounting the base consisting of the infinity of consciousness, aware that there's nothing, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the base consisting of nothingness. One of the things which we are again told, surmounting the base, letting go. If we don't let go, we can't go somewhere new. We're going to be stuck. And again, by completely surmounting the base consisting of nothingness, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception. And again, the bhikkhu is said to have blindfolded Mara, depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. Now these are the 8 jhanas, but here's a new one, the 9th one. Having enough trouble with 8, huh? And here's the 9th one. Well, I can console you. The 9th one is only available to non-returner and arahants. So, we'll have to wait a while. Maybe next week. Again, by completely surmounting the base consisting of neither perception nor non-perception, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the cessation of perception and feeling. And his taints are exhausted by his seeing with understanding. His taints are exhausted by seeing with understanding. What's that? Insight. Seeing with understanding is insight. You cannot exhaust taints without insight. The jhanas do not exhaust our taints. In fact, sometimes they may actually bring in a new clinging, but they do give us, when we use the insight that they give us, then they are the way to do it, because this is the way the Buddha prescribes to do it. And they give us the insight, as I said, about the sense desires, and in the higher jhanas, they give us the insight that there's nobody there during the jhana. After the jhana is over, of course, we're there, fully fledged again, trying to do something. So here, the taints are exhausted by his seeing with understanding, What does he see with understanding? He sees with understanding that in all the bases of the jhanas, there's still a person experiencing them. And a person experiencing them is still liable to temptation and liable to dukkha. It's impossible to be a person and not have dukkha, even subtle dukkha. It doesn't have to be gross dukkha. It's only when there isn't the person experiencing them that we can be without. And when there is cessation of perception and feeling, for total cessation, which is called nirodha, then of course there's no person. However, as the person comes out of it, that is the seeing and understanding. Now, in order to be arahant or non-returner, the nirodha experience is not necessary. It can be a stepping away from self through the past moment. Nirodha is not a past moment, but it is a jhanic experience which lasts a long time. It can last up to 7 days. And in that time, a person, if another person were to see such a person, they'd think he's dead, because there's no breath to be perceived at all. But the person isn't dead. So if a person were to do this, they'd have to be in a protected environment. And it is a state of cessation. The word nirodha means cessation. And in this case, it means cessation of perception and feeling. Of course, the arahant has already had that past moment. The non-returner may use this nirodha instead of the one past moment and have that cessation. But it's not the only way to go through to the full enlightenment stage. It has to be understood. His pains are exhausted by seeing with understanding. That's why after every jhana experience, seeing and understanding are absolutely essential. Not just saying, oh, that was nice, I'll try and do it again. No, that's not good enough. But seeing and understanding. And the more we see and understand, the more we are nearing to Nibbana. And Nibbana is not losing anything except our delusions. The delusions which keep us in the realm of birth and death, which keep us in the realm of good and bad, of yours and mine, of tomorrow and yesterday, of having and not having, wanting, getting rid of, and all the rest of the duality. And in that duality, it is impossible to have total harmony and total peace. Reality can never provide that. So we're not losing a thing, we're only getting rid of delusions. It's often people worry about it's annihilating, nihilistic or something like that. Yes, it annihilates taints and it annihilates delusion. So what is explained here we haven't come across before, 9th jhana, or called nirodha, Nirodha, which means cessation. And it is a cessation of all perception and feeling, and it can last a moment. And when it's a moment, it's a past moment. It can last up to 7 days, it can last 7 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, it doesn't matter. But that one moment, that is the past moment, where all cessation happens, it's complete still point, nothing happens. And afterwards it has to be understood. Otherwise we don't know what has been done. So the word nirodha usually, and this also depicts a long-lasting experience, it can be the moment of the past also, because that is a cessation, the moment of cessation of perception and feeling. All perfectly clear, or anything?
So, in this one, I'm just curious about if you're a non-returner. This is only open to non-returners in our hearts, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if you're a non-returner and you have this nirodha, do you become an arhat?
If you have the insight, yes.
so you have to have the insight after.
Yes.
I'm a little confused about nothing, the jhana of nothingness.
Yes.
If you have that experience, then there's somebody still experiencing that. Wouldn't it be fairly easy to confuse that experience of nothingness with experiencing neither perceiving or not perception and non-perception?
Oh yes, it's very easy to confuse all the different immaterial jhanas with each other, and it's even quite easy to have the delusion that they are enlightenment experiences. That's why one has to be very clear what one is doing. If one is doing it many times and is able to discuss it, one becomes quite clear what it is. So the experience of the base of nothingness, particularly if it follows, which is number 7, if it follows the 6th one, is a very distinctive experience. And the neither perception nor non-perception is also distinctive. And if one falls into any of that without having any previous pathway, one probably wouldn't know what one's doing. And it would be also fairly useless because one can't get the understanding of it. They are not so similar because in neither perception nor non-perception the observer is practically gone, whereas in the base of nothingness the observer is quite there. It's quite different, actually.
So the observer is not observing nothingness in himself or herself?
No. Excuse me. Having gone through the experiences of the infinity of space and consciousness, the self has already been dissolved at that time. The self of body and the self of mind has been dissolved into an infinity of a totality of both, of space and consciousness, of form and mind. And then there is no way to observing self. But what is being observed in the base of nothingness is a fact that within infinity of mind and infinity of consciousness, infinity of space and infinity of consciousness, there is nothing in there which is either limited, can be delineated, has form, has shape, can be anything that is solid, nothing in it. Empty room. So there's no way to get back to self at that time. It is the infinity has been seen. So within that infinity there's nothing solid to be found. Now all these are very much very helpful in preparatory steps to an enlightenment experience. But they're not enlightenment experiences in themselves. But they're certainly, if one knows what one is seeing, knowing and seeing, they are really the necessary steps to take if one wants to get enlightened. Not everybody likes to get enlightened. Does this answer your question? Yes.
The steps that the Buddha went to leading up to his enlightenment, unless I missed something, there was no pre-enlightenment experience, like an experience of path or anything like that was described. It was full enlightenment. And prior to that there was no enlightenment or no inkling of enlightenment. So is that an unusual sequence?
Well, what is said about it, and I think it's a later addition because people do go around asking such questions, said that you can go through all 4 stages of enlightenment in one sit and one mind moment. So that actually the enlightenment experience that he went through were all 4 stages all at once. And this is supposed to have happened also to some of his disciples when he was alive. For us it's probably more likely that we can gain, if we practice sufficiently, stream entry, and might even rest on our laurels there, which wouldn't be very wise, but it's better than resting on our laurels before we do. But this is the way it's explained.
He seemed pretty, well, he was absolutely determined when he sat down finally for that final sitting that he wouldn't move from that place until he was enlightened.
That's right. Even if the flesh would rot from the bones, he was going to stay there. And while he was sitting there, then Mara came, and he sent his daughters away, and then he was able to do it. But he had already had the facility and the ability to do the 8 jhanas, up and down and down and up, and then as he came out, that's when he had the insight. So it is actually what he's teaching. It's very clear. He's teaching that the jhanas are the preparatory steps and the insight has to follow. But here, what I'm saying is, and he's, from what he teaches, at every level of jhana, insight can be attained. And it is every step, every jhana can bring insight into reality, at least one portion of reality, according to the portion that we have experienced in the jhana. And that's absolutely essential. Anything else? Any dislike, any rejection, any anger, any worry, any fear, any anxiety, look closely. See if there's anything like that. Any irritation, any viewpoint, any belief, any opinion. Let it float away like a black cloud in the sky. Which is what these really are. Do not hold on to any of it. Let heart and mind be open and empty, spacious, free, pure. And then fill them with love and compassion to overflowing, so that you're filled with those 2 emotions from head to toe. No speck of yourself without them. see if you can feel a difference in your inner being. Now that you're completely filled with only love and compassion, which are warmth and caring, softness and giving, accepting, embracing. Let love and compassion flow out of you to the person nearest you in this room. Let it flow from your heart, come out of your pores. Be nothing but love and compassion. And let it reach to the person nearest you. Let it flow further and reach to everyone here. Giving to everyone, filling everyone with your love and compassion, which are like an unending stream coming out of your heart. Let it flow out through those people who are near and dear to you, filling them with your love and compassion. Feel the warmth, the caring, the giving. Find the reality of those states of heart and mind within you. Feel them and let them flow. Now think of your friends. Reach out to them. Give them your love and your compassion. Let them be part of the friendship you feel for them. Think of people you know, you work with, you meet, you see here and there, acquaintances. Let your heart be open and giving. Let this stream of love and compassion flow so it can touch all these people's hearts. Think of anyone whom you don't like or don't approve of. Remember views and opinions. Let the heart speak without discrimination. Let love and compassion flow unimpeded to such a person also. Think of people in your hometown, whether you know them or not. The love and compassion from your heart. Reach out to touch as many of them as you can. In the houses, on the streets, in the shops, wherever they may be. Give them warmth, caring, embracing, accepting, loving. the attention back on yourself. Become aware of the purity of heart and mind that can contain only love and compassion.